My name is Chris Bushy, and this is my discussion presentation for the collection of essays Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice by Leah Lakshmi Pupshna Samarisana. This presentation will be split into 4 main parts. First, we will discuss the author's background and credentials. Then we will review a summary of the collection and essays. We will then move on to discussing the most important, interesting, and irritating sentences. And finally, I will conclude and post questions to you for further discussion. As promised, our first section will talk about Leah Lakshmi Pupshna Samarisana, who uses they/she pronouns. Pupshna Samarisana is of mixed Sri Lankan, Irish, Ukrainian, and Romani lineage. They identify on their author as, quote, sick, disabled, and autistic, a non-binary femme on the stoop. I appreciate this description of themselves because it showcases the breadth of identities that a single person has beyond just disabled or queer or another identity. In addition, they are a Lambda Award winner and a lead performer for Sins Invalid, which is a disability justice performance collective. I was also interested to learn from their author website that they were raised locally in Worcester, Massachusetts. Now we will get into reviewing the main themes and sections of the collection. This collection of 19 essays, not including the preface, are split into 4 general parts. These parts are not named specifically, but the essays in each one have an overarching theme that bind them all together. The first and longest part contains 6 separate essays, all discussing their personal experiences with disability justice and community. These essays seamlessly blend together factual history with very personal anecdotes in order to give a vision of both the progress that disability justice has made and where there are still ways to improve. My favorite of these was the essay interview titled Crip Sex Moments and the Lust of Recognition, a conversation with E.T. Russian. In this conversation, Leah and E.T. discuss the various ways that romantic and sexual relationships can be strained or made more difficult by the ignorance or discomfort of people without disabilities. Part 2 of the collection focuses on the dreams and predictions of a future based in disability justice. This section is a mix of the author's, quote, wild disability justice dreams, unquote, and more modest proposals and thoughts about accessibility in all aspects of society. Leah's witty sense of humor and breadth of knowledge come together to make this part of the book extremely resonant. Part 3 of the book is used as an opportunity for Leah to really focus on the ways that inaccessibility is an act of harm. They discuss issues of mental health and fatigue, as well as the emotional and mental burden of continuously having to fight for accessibility. This part is deeply emotional and personal and beautifully segues into the 4th and final part, which focuses on encouraging people with disabilities to advocate for themselves as a whole person, rather than just as a person with a disability. They encourage their readers with disabilities to learn techniques for sustainably fighting for disability justice in order to protect their mental health and quality of life. Overall, I would call this collection both a call out to society that we need to do better and a love letter to people with disabilities to remind them that they are not alone in their experiences. Next, we will discuss the sentences that I found to be most important, interesting, and irritating. The most important sentence I found in the collection was on page 254. Quote, I remind myself that we are each other's archive. Any time an SD person remembers each other and movement in movement history, we memorialize our history. We witness ourselves into being, end quote. This sentence really resonated with me in today's political climate, where different aspects of, quote, DEI and, quote, history are actively being erased by the Trump administration, including the erasure of transgender people from the Stonewall Monument website, along with others. It is important as librarians that we fight to collect and keep the stories of those around us, as they may be the only way that these stories survive. The most interesting sentence came from the essay, Cripping the Apocalypse, Some of My Wild Disability Justice Dreams. Quote, but sometimes a person who's angry and defensive about an inaccessible space is flashing back to their mom who died poor and alone, their uncle's polio or schizophrenia no one would talk about, The way the only survival story many Black and brown communities have had is to deny our needs, work 16 hours, and suck it up. This is from page 129. I found this sentence to be interesting because it really clearly highlights the way that accessibility can be viewed differently based on background. We have talked a lot about intersectionality as a part of disability justice in this course, but this sentence beautifully summarized all of the ways that intersectionality is so important. Finally, the most irritating sentence came from the essay Crip Sex Moments and the Lust of Recognition. Quote, and I was like, totally, yeah. My mom had polio and they didn't have money for health care, so her doctor that she saw, true story, was like, here's a bicycle, ride it out, end quote. This story was intensely irritating for me for obvious reasons. That a medical doctor would give such useless and harmful advice is infuriating, but unfortunately, all too easy to believe. As a person with chronic migraines, I've had my fair share of fighting with medical professionals who would write off my headaches as eye strain or dehydration or occasionally a side effect of menstruation. So this story really, really resonated with me and was infuriating to read. This book was absolutely fascinating to read and left me with a lot of questions that I would like to pose to all of you for discussion. First, how do you think that you or your library can be better collectors of disabled stories or stories in general? How might you go about proposing such a project? Second, how did you feel about Peepshna Samarsina's story about how a doctor, quote unquote, treated her mother's polio? Were you surprised? How did that anecdote change the way you view our healthcare system? Third, what did you think of Peepshna Samarsina's characterization of being, quote, people who were less than middle class in movements that were very middle class? This is from page 119. And finally, Peepshna Samarsina talks a lot throughout the book about how constant advocacy and education is damaging to the mental health of people who are marginalized. What active steps can we take to relieve that burden? How might you take those steps today in your regular life? Thank you so much for listening to my presentation and participating in the conversation with me. Below are my references for you to review so you can do some more of your own research.